emphasizing patriotism of united people, that they have been ready to do everything. And the name of the action was Death of Victory.
So in early April, the Palmachs stationed in the hills around Jerusalem planned an attack to free the Jerusalem corridor so that food and other supplies could be brought into the city. This footage shows Arab troops preparing for battle on one of the hills around Jerusalem. The cameraman was with the Arab troops as they attacked. The Arabs are practicing the capture of a Jewish settlement just outside the city. Each village around Jerusalem was crucial to the control of the city. Only a few miles outside Jerusalem was this magnificent hill, with a view stretching out all over Judea down to the Mediterranean Sea. It was called the Castel, or Castle, and the remains stand where there had once been a Roman and later a Crusader fort. Arab control of this hill at Castel cut off Jewish Jerusalem from the coast. On April the 3rd, Jewish forces captured the hill, but after a continuous 6-day battle, they were driven off. Their last order became a watchword. All privates will retreat. All commanders will cover their withdrawal. On the evening of the 8th of April, the Jews still held the hill, though thousands of Arab irregulars were approaching ever closer. One of the platoon commanders on the Castel was Menachem Ullman.
The one who sit on the castle control all the area. And the commander was, the Palestinian commander was Abdul Qadir Husseini. And he sent everybody who could, thousands of them. In the last attack, we let them come in until the fence, because we have been short of bullets. They have reported before they came to the fence that they already inside. But then we pushed them back. Then later, after half an hour, a jeep with United Nations came. He wanted to see our commander. Then he said, "You don't know at whom you killed. Abdul Qadir Husseini is dead here on the road."
There was a massive funeral for Husseini in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, the area called by the Arabs Haram el-Sharif, the holy sanctuary. Husseini's death sowed disillusionment in Arab ranks. Their best commander had been killed. On the same day as the funeral, the 10th of April, there was another disaster for the Arabs, one with a profound political effect. Forces of the Irgun Jewish army attacked an Arab village, Deir Yassin, and conquered it. But there were more than 200 Arab dead, many of them women and children. The regular Jewish leadership was aghast and disavowed the attack. Arabs elsewhere abandoned their homes, fleeing in the hope that they would return shortly afterwards behind the conquering Arab armies. A main Arab objective was the Jewish quarter of the old city. Jews had lived here for hundreds of years, within walking distance of the Wailing Wall. Arab shelling was continuous. On April the 13th, a kindergarten was hit and 20 children injured. As the siege continued, the hardship and distress inside the quarter intensified. So did the shelling. The Hadassah Hospital on Mount Scopus, adjoining the Mount of Olives and situated next to the Hebrew University, was connected to the rest of Jewish Jerusalem by a narrow road through an Arab quarter. Hadassah was Jerusalem's main Jewish hospital. Supported by an American women's organization, it served both Jews and Arabs. But there was no immunity from the spreading violence. On April the 14th, a Jewish convoy was driving along this road. It was bringing with it doctors, nurses, medical supplies, and patients to the Hadassah hospital. Arab gunmen opened fire, pinning the convoy down. 77 Jews were killed. A young American girl wrote in her diary, "All Jerusalem is walking around asking itself, is there no end to it?" In the country's north, the hills of the Galilee were as fertile in mid-April 1948 as they are today. The farmers, Jews and Arabs alike, wanted to harvest their crops before full-scale hostilities broke out. The British planned to evacuate the area's police stations, but would not say exactly when. As the Arabs planned their attacks, emergency meetings took place in the kibbutzim. Ben-Gurion's order was to hold every Jewish settlement. By mid-April, despite fierce Arab attacks, not a single Jewish settlement had been lost. On April the 15th, the British evacuated the police forts at Safed and here at Nebi Yusha, strategic points controlling the eastern Galilee. This elite commando unit prepared a two-pronged surprise attack on Nebi Yusha. Many of these young men lost their lives. The attack was driven off. The Palmach was defeated for the first time, a failure that shocked Jewish morale. Yair Parag was one of the fighters.
In one night, half of our people were killed or severely wounded. 22 people, mostly from one group living in one kibbutz, coming from the same youth movement.
Elsewhere, there were startling successes. On the 18th of April, the British evacuated the police fort in Tiberias. After Arab attacks, Jewish forces took the initiative and cut the city in two. The Arab civilians fled, leaving the city under Jewish control. A few days later, with the British secretly laying plans for their final departure from Haifa, the Haganah determined to seize the city and thus open up its port to Jewish immigration. In the battle for Haifa, the Jewish and Arab forces were evenly matched, about 600 fighting men on each side. At sunset on April the 20th, the Haganah launched a pincer attack on the Arab quarter from the port below and the upper town above. The Haganah appealed to the Arab population to stay in Haifa, but most Arab civilians fled, leaving the city to the Jews. The fighting was fierce. The Jewish forces were stunningly successful. In the fighting, there were dead on both sides. The battle ended on April the 22nd with a Jewish victory. As the Arab leaders left Haifa, they told the Jews, "We do not recognize you, and we shall return when you are no longer here." On the 24th of April, the British evacuated the police fort at Semach, at the southern end of the Sea of Galilee. The Jews succeeded in taking it over. Just a few days later, a few miles to the south, the police fort near Kibbutz Gesher became the scene of battle. As the British evacuated, Jews from Kibbutz Gesher seized the police fort. Gesher means bridge, and 3 bridges cross the River Jordan at this spot, one of them dating from Roman times. The Haifa-Damascus Railroad crossed the Turkish bridge. The railway station nearby, and the bridges, were strategic points that controlled the crossing between Transjordan and Palestine. Suddenly, on the 27th of April, the Jordanian Arab Legion, a British-trained and well-armed regular army, appeared on the Jordanian side of the river. The young men and women of Gesher, few of them more than 30 years old, had limited military training. The kibbutz children had already been evacuated. At a kibbutz meeting, it was decided that one person from each married couple with children would be sent away to safety. Among those present was Dubi Bar.
We decided that from every family, one family with children, one of the parents shall be outside, that the children shall not be orphans of the 2 parents, only of one. And we decided that mostly the mother is going out, living here, and but in some cases the mother was more important for the defense of the place than the father, and the decision was that he who is more important for the defense of this place shall remain here.
Facing determined Jewish resistance, the Arab Legion halted and turned. The Arab Legion forces from Gesher were transferred to the Jerusalem front. Skirmishes throughout the city were already determining the outlines of Jerusalem's neighborhoods. The Jews, desperately short of food and ammunition, decided nonetheless to go on to the attack, to link up the Jewish neighborhoods. On the 29th of April, Jewish forces attacked in the Katamon section. The key to the battle was the Greek Orthodox monastery of San Simon, held by Iraqi army troops. The Jews secured the position, making the monastery a Jewish command post. The Jews now controlled most of the western part of the city, though the Jewish quarter of the old city was beleaguered and cut off. Towards the end of April, on the 26th, the battle for Jaffa, a port city next to Tel Aviv, began. Jaffa was part of the area to be included in the Arab state under the United Nations partition plan. Irgun forces led the way in an attack coordinated with the Haganah. British shelling of Tel Aviv and an aerial attack on nearby Bat Yam were meant to help the Arabs. British soldiers fired on the Jews, who threatened to bring about the fall of this vital Arab city. By the 11th of May, the Jews had won. There was mass flight from Jaffa by the Arabs. Of 70,000 Arab residents, only 3,000 remained in the city. Almost simultaneously, the fight for the control of the eastern Galilee, in the north of the country, reached its climax. The Arabs of Safed had a reputation as tough fighters. When the British had evacuated in mid-April, a Palmach unit had infiltrated into the Jewish quarter in the upper city. For a period of several weeks, there was a stalemate.
Finally, we made one attack. It was unsuccessful. The morale was very low. The people of Safed shouted on us, "Why did you do it for us? Because otherwise we'd surrender to the Arabs and we shall survive and live. Now they will massacre all of us."
Palmach commander Yigal Allon infiltrated through Arab lines to organize an attack. On the evening of the 10th of May, the attack began.
In the morning, Safed was empty. About 15,000 people left in one night, and Safed was in our hand.
In Tel Aviv, the Jewish leadership was ever more determined to declare a state. They feared an invasion from regular Arab armies. One possibility for stopping the onslaught was to persuade the king of Transjordan, Abdullah, to remove himself from the coalition of Arab armies. Ben-Gurion designated Golda Meir as a secret emissary. She proceeded secretly at night with a small team through Arab-controlled territory. Last-minute efforts were made to avert war. On May the 10th, Golda Meir came here to the River Jordan and, disguised as an Arab woman, crossed the bridge to meet King Abdullah at his summer palace at Shuner. The king said there would be no war if the Jews agreed not to declare a state and if they halted all future Jewish immigration. This was unacceptable. Tens of thousands of survivors of the Holocaust were waiting to enter Palestine. If His Majesty wants war, Golda Meir told the king, there will be war. And she added, perhaps we will meet again soon, after the establishment of the state. With the state about to be declared, the Arabs renewed their attacks on the small Jewish kibbutz Kfar Etzion to the south of Jerusalem. The wounded were removed to a neighboring kibbutz. Arab irregulars then entered Kfar Etzion and massacred all who were there. Shortly afterwards, the Transjordanian Arab Legion expelled the irregulars and captured the neighboring Jewish settlements.
And the moment when the Jewish state was created, established, the last of us left the Gush Etzion, the Etzion block, and became prisoners of war.
On the 14th of May, 1948, Israel became a state. There was now Jewish sovereignty within a part of the land of Israel, after 2,000 years of dispersion. There was happiness on the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. The joy of the present obscured the looming dangers of what might happen on the morrow. On May the 15th, Egyptian Spitfires attacked Tel Aviv. Damage on the first day of all-out war was considerable. One Spitfire was shot down. The Arabs had shown that their fighter planes had a long reach right into the Jewish population centers. Military opinion was fairly unanimous that the state could not survive. Field Marshal Montgomery, who had commanded the victorious Allied armies in North Africa and Northern Europe, gave us his opinion that the state of Israel would be defeated within 2 weeks. The Arabs threatened Israel on every front. To the south, the Egyptian army prepared a full-scale attack on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. In the center, the Jordanian Arab Legion was already in Jerusalem and now reinforced its troops. They were joined by the Iraqi army. To the north, both the Syrian and Lebanese armies prepared for invasion. On May the 15th, the Syrians were poised to attack here at the southern end of the Sea of Galilee. They advanced during the night. The 2 nearest Jewish settlements were evacuated. At Semach, 42 Jews were defending the former British police fortress. They fought for 2 days until all 42 were killed. In Tel Aviv, David Ben-Gurion ordered Moshe Dayan to the north with the words, "Hold the Jordan Valley settlements." Dayan rallied the forces for defense, but ammunition and arms were desperately short. At 4:30 on the morning of May the 20th, the Syrian army attacked Degania with tanks and flamethrowers. A bloody battle ensued. The Syrians were on the verge of victory when, at about noon, 2 Israeli artillery pieces, which had only recently landed at Tel Aviv port, arrived and opened fire. The effect was immediate, both physically and psychologically. The Syrians withdrew. Degania had been saved. A thrill of relief swept through the new state. Regular Arab armies could be defeated. Israel could survive. The artillery pieces were of French make, called Napoleonchiks. The Haganah's northern command had only 2 of them. They proved invaluable. To the south of Degania, the kibbutzniks of Kibbutz Gesher were reinforced by the Haganah. They had spent 2 weeks in training. They had more arms and ammunition than before. But, as if to confirm their worst fears, an Iraqi army force suddenly appeared on the Jordanian side of the river, where the Jordanian Arab Legion had been camped only 2 weeks earlier. On May the 16th, the Iraqis blew in the gate, and an Iraqi armored vehicle entered into the center of the fortress. It was quickly destroyed by the Israelis. For 7 days, the fort at Gesher was besieged. Kibbutzniks and Israeli soldiers maintaining themselves against enormous odds. Then on the 7th day, the 2 Israeli artillery pieces, which had successfully defended Degania to the north, were rushed south, opened fire, and the Iraqis fled. To the south of the country in the Negev desert, the Israelis had several settlements. Holding the water line to these settlements was crucial. The Egyptians expected light opposition from the Israeli forces. The Egyptian army decided on a massive 2-pronged attack that would cut the country in 2. One force would cut through the Judean mountains to seize Jerusalem from the south, thus depriving King Abdullah of Jordan of exclusive control of the city. The main Egyptian force would push up along the coast towards Tel Aviv. This mock-up of a battlefield commemorates the 100 men and women who held out heroically against the attacking Egyptian forces for 5 days. On May the 19th, the Egyptians attacked here at Yad Mordechai, south of Tel Aviv. The defenders faced infantry, tanks, artillery, and aircraft. On the 2nd day of the battle, 18 men were killed. On the 3rd day, the kibbutz signaled, "The men's morale is sinking. They approach exhaustion." One of the commanders of the threatened kibbutz was Munya Brandwein.
They attacked us with artillery, airplanes, and mortars. Their infantry advanced to a distance of 150 meters from our lines. We opened fire, we attacked, and then they had losses and they pulled back. We thought they would withdraw altogether. In those first 2 days of battle, we had 18 men killed.
Reinforcements arrived, but after 5 days of intense fighting, the kibbutz had to be abandoned. Those 5 days provided an essential breathing space, whereby arms and reinforcements could be sent north for the defense of Tel Aviv.
Here, next to me, my friends died, people I'd grown up with, people I'd known since I was a youth. Here, my friend's baby and my baby lived in the very same room. It was a spiritual problem. How could we personally stand up to what was happening and